On the global scene, there seems to be quite a bit of shake-up in many economies around the world. Inflation in Europe and Americas, it is getting to double digits at present, and with a prospect for maybe a global recession around the corner. In Nigeria, it hasn't also been very easy. We know that despite the spike in the price of crude oil, Nigeria has not been able to make good like it used to be. We don't have any crude oil windfall this time around. Inflation is at 19.6%. Unemployment is still in the double digits, about 33%, as reported by the National Bureau for Statistics. But in all of this, is it all doom and gloom? What about the Nigerian human capital? How much investment have we made in that? And we said, we've always agreed in economic circles that perhaps our greatest prospect is among our human capital. What about our other national resources and natural resources, as it were? What can we make of what we have? How come, as of 1960, many of the economies that we were at par with, like South Korea, Thailand, and co., sort of moved ahead of us, such that we look forward to those countries today as developed countries, at least nudging at the edge of that level, while we are still back at this level, which is not good enough? What are the roles of Nigeria in Africa as a leader? Are we losing that role, and what can we do to get it back? Today we're going to be focusing less on the doom and gloom. Less on the doom and gloom. That is very easy for many people to talk about. We're looking at the prospects of the Nigerian economy, and we're going to be looking at the bright side, the sunny side, the prospects, the advantages, the opportunities, as it were. That is what we're going to be talking about today. And joining us to look at this is Mr. Stephen Jolayemi. He's an entrepreneur, financial and management consultant. Welcome, Mr. Jolayemi.
Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. So, I've just given a little brief about, what we intend to talk about today. What comes to your mind, just looking at the topic?
Well, looking at the topic, I want to state that we need to first understand, as we all know, that we are in the times, and we're living in the times of big changes. And of course, we are bombarded daily, globally, with bad news, stories that affects us and impacts our hope of the goodness and the abundance of resources that we need to tap into right around us. Therefore, our perspective today is not looking at the challenges. We have stayed along enough on that trend. We need to start looking at things from the positive hand. So we need to train ourselves.
How do we convince Nigerians who are deeply rooted in the negatives? And in fact, remember that we're now in an era where everybody's talking of jackpot, this one jackpot, everybody wants to. And it's very embarrassing because, as you may well know, a few days ago I was in the UAE, and I had cause to know that maybe perhaps 100 Nigerians were deported. And every day they've been deporting all these Nigerians and so on, because I think in the UAE they said, well, of course, as a result of all of the rascality of some of our people there, but also the UAE somehow just decided to, throw the book in our faces and say, you're coming on a wrong visa, so go back to your country. And so we're in an era of jackpot. How do you convince Nigerians that there's positivity?
All right, I think we're in the season, and globally it is called, we're in the times of closing the doors. If you check, not only with the UAE, it's a global phenomenon. Even China, they are closing the doors right now on not only Nigerians, many of the nations that seems not to be added value in terms of human capital and economic values. So globally, the trend is where every country is checking to see the values they can get. Even in Europe, predominantly they want to see what values you are coming to add before you are given hand, because they don't want to build on. And you can see migration globally has been on the high trend. The UN is making a global effort to see that especially Africans stay back in Africa, and a lot of investment has been going on in the last 4 to 5 years. If you check with the Nations Office on International Office on Migration, with the office in Nigeria, there have been a lot of investment to see that there is awareness and to see how they can build infrastructures to encourage people to stay back in the countries, because we need to first have the hope, because it is not as bad as we say it.
Wow.
And we should learn. We need to learn from countries like China. They were once at the level where we are now.
Wonderful.
Yes. 40 years ago, China was poverty-ridden. The population of the poor was far worse than what we have today.
But look at that turnaround.
The turnaround is a global and a common phenomenon that we all know. And it is a case of necessity being the mother of invention. And that was the turning point where they had to look inwards. Like I used to say, we need to start, even as Nigerians and Africa as a whole, looking beyond what obtains outside. We need to look inside the box, look inwards. What are the opportunities that are abound around us? What are the things that we have around us? We need to learn from others. What are the lessons learned from from other countries, even African countries?
Like which
Take,
one?
for example, Rwanda.
Rwanda, okay.
The genocide in Rwanda, look at about just within the space of 3 months, over 800,000 citizens were murdered simply because they followed the trend that Nigeria is going through now. We are divided among ourselves.
Yeah.
Nobody cares whether you are from the east, whether you are from the north, whether you are from the southwest, like we are dragging in-house. The situation now is a country that's about to implode. So we need to look at the positive side of things. We need to conduct an internal analysis, that is a SWOT analysis on the situation of the country. And in doing SWOT analysis, you need to focus. There are two divides. You have the strength and the weakness, you have the opportunity and the threats. We need to start looking at the strengths in Nigeria. And what do you do in applying SWOT analysis as an internal analysis factor? We need to see how we use the strengths that we have locally to manage the threats, to manage the challenges, the weaknesses that are now. Do a quick check around you, sir. And I've done that in the last few days. Early will you see a family that you know, either directly or indirectly, has not gotten one member of the family outside of the country.
Yeah.
Because we have lost hope.
That's the strength, right?
Yes.
Or is it an opportunity, or what kind of thing? How do we categorize that? And fine. I mean, fantastic. But in all of this, how do we move on? For example, how do we learn from China? How do we learn from Rwanda? How do we begin to, like, from where we are now? We're at the edge, at that precipice where we're right at the edge of that, like what you said, what happened in Rwanda. In Nigeria, you have secessionists, people who say, we don't want to have anything to do with this entity. People will also say, younger folk, which bothers me a lot, will say, may Nigeria never happen to you. And I say, what does it mean for Nigeria to happen to someone? I was thinking that Nigeria is a great country.
Yes.
And that's why we named this program the Nationalist, because even in terms of, though we talk a lot of economics and finance, but it has come from a nationalistic, a patriotic point of view.
Yes.
And for my study of the great economists in the world, Maynard Keynes, Alfred Marshall, all those powerful people, even Milton Friedman, and the guys that are still around now, the Stiglitzes of this world, Krugman, they thought for they are nationalists, and so, but we have all this negativity going on. What do we do from this point?
Very good. The first point of call, if you follow the trend and history, like you used to say, follow history. And in the history, if you do a quick check with China and the developed country, many of them looked inwards, and meaning that they are looking at what are the things that we have left. Despite the hopelessness, what do we have?
What do we have left in
China saw the strength in their human capital, and of course they went the way of technology.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, that is also a season because they are now at the peak of development. Because right now they are entering into a period where they are having challenges in sustaining that level of development. Take, for instance, electricity.
Yeah.
Right now, they are struggling with they cannot produce enough electricity in China to even meet their domestic needs at home. So it has been a global phenomenon. Look at what the environment is. Highly polluted because of the level of development now. If we check, is it Jiangsu or Shenzhen, where development actually started, Right now, they are struggling in terms of the population and the cost of living there because there is the overpopulation.
Yeah, I want to challenge you on something, Mr. Stephen, because the premise of what you have said is like usually there'll be the boom and bust cycle. Every society will get to a certain development peak, and then you see a downturn.
Cyclical trend,
and when you hit the rock bottom, you see a rise, like that. You know, but is that also applicable to Nigeria?
Very well.
Historically, where can we trace that? People talk about, oh, the good old days, but for me, I think that those days in the 1950s and 60s, early 60s, after the white man and the colonial people had left, a lot of people were in the villages. And, so that was the era in which my dad and his brothers, everybody moved to Ibadan, from Ibadan to Lagos.
Sure. I'm actually coming to that.
Now, so you saw a scenario where everybody left the villages and everybody wanted to get on the action in Lagos, in Kaduna, in Port Harcourt and co, in Enugu and co, in Kano, so that now creates the real Nigeria now emerged, where there was just not enough resource to take care of people. And apart from that, I think that, in those days where you wanted to go to university, the community will donate money for you, and then, they'll see you off to the airport or to the ship, and they'll bring Atilogu dancers and so on, And when you were coming back, another party will happen, and then you have 2 jobs, 2 cars, But can we call it the good old days? Because it seemed like we just didn't project far enough to see, okay, what will the population growth rate be? And can we sustain that level of opulence that existed among a few? I also remember 1947, the discussion happened between Tai Sholari and Awolowo. I think, I think they were both in the Ibadan House of Assembly then. And Tai Sholari was of the view that, look, those boys were keeping in King's College. You brought them from their village mother houses to King's College. He said, if we continue with this, that we're going to see a scenario where the graduates of King's College will thumb their noses at Nigeria and say, we don't have time for you, we're going abroad. And of course, what we have seen is graduates of such places, exclusive colleges, including some of the top universities in Nigeria, especially the private universities, private, secondary schools that have top pay. Most of them are living abroad now. They won't have anything to do with Nigeria. So I want to challenge you on that. Those good old days, were they really good? And can we say that Nigeria is also following the same trajectory as in China and all of that?
Sure, we're on the same trajectory. And how do we get to understand it? You need to go back to the beginning. What attracted the colonial masters to Africa in the first place? One thing, the mineral resources.
Yeah.
The resources that abound in Africa. Until today, many of the countries are still tied to that, like Zimbabwe, like Malawi. Most of the resources that are used in producing solar panels. In fact, the major one that is used in solar panels is in Malawi. And China has bought everything over already. Wow. They have taken over, and they are mining those resources and sending to China as we speak. Even they can't catch up with the demands of electricity. Let's come back home. Mineral resources brought the whites into this part of the world, and especially in Nigeria. And what they did was to see the richness and the quantity of resources which today are still there. I want to take, because of time, a quick drop on each of the states. There is hardly a state in Nigeria. Every state, if you go, the figures are outside there. Every state in Nigeria has minimum of 1 mineral resources that are of commercial scale. And I trickle down to Kogi State. Kogi State has 29 mineral resources that are of commercial capacity that can sustain Nigeria for the next 400 years.
Wonderful. Please hold your thoughts there, Mr. Stephen. We're going to take a short break, to pay the bills, and just do bear with us. Stay tuned. Welcome back, viewers. And if you're just joining us, this is the Nationalist, your program on Trust TV. And today we've been talking to Mr. Stephen Jolayemi on the prospects and opportunities, the strengths of Nigeria, focusing more on the positives, you know. And before we went on break, you were talking about just Kogi State alone, and you made this, you know, call it a fantastic assertion that, you know, we have enough resources in Kogi to last 400 years. How can you back that up?
Yes. I tell you, in Kogi State alone, I'll give you numbers, the figures. We have dolomite, we have coal, we have bauxite, we have iron ore. And of course, you know, we have tar there, limestone. Don't think outside the box. Let's think inside the box.
That's I'm very excited by that statement because, you know, you'd have thought, people say, oh, let's think. A lot of consultants tell you, think outside the box. You know, you've been, but you're saying that even within the box.
We don't need to think outside the box.
But wait, two things are, you know, number one is, you know, having these resources and being able to use them is a different ballgame, and you know, adding value in terms of science and technology, because these resources have always been there. I remember there's a BBC article titled "The Day Oil Was Discovered in Nigeria." Anyone can Google it, and it's still there. And there's a certain man called Mr. Joseph Nengite, a Nigerian, and a job person in Oloibiri, 1956. He mentioned, described what happened when the white man discovered the oil. So these people were here, they said they were looking for oil. We didn't know which oil were they looking for. They are standing there in the water. And so by the time the black liquid gushed out of the, you know, earth, the white man was so excited. He bought them, you know, drinks, Fanta, this, whatever. You know, they were really enjoying themselves. But they didn't understand what it was about. So we've always had all of these resources. So converting that resource, like you said now in Malawi, the Chinese has bought over the resource for solar panels, almost fully. I also know that in Zambia, they said that some of their mines that were being sold for cheap, you know. So what's the difference in Nigeria? It's the same issue. How do we get past that very serious problem?
Okay, let me take you from Kogi State where I stopped. We have seen our very own Dangote, Elijah Aliko Dangote, set up a cement factory in Kogi State, which is doing extremely well. I tell you, Kogi State alone holds enough limestone to keep 3 giant-sized cement factories with over 15 metric tons annual capacity. And they can run that for the next, unbroken, for the next 99 years. The records are online. I picked that even from the Kogi State site, Kogi News. I got that from there. And if
so
you
what
check
happened to the national iron ore, Itakpe iron ore? There's the one that's closed down in just as you're getting to after Lokoja there, before you get to Okene, there's that.
In fact, there are numerous. If you begin to talk about iron ore, you remind me of so many things. The opportunities are abundant. Even at the national level, our very own another point, the Innocent Matu, the man is doing greatly well. He has given us something, the platform for us to build upon as a nation. Take example from India. Their very own Tata built the vehicle, and the nations built on it. They bought into it. Nothing stops us from looking inwards. Let us sit down with him, have an agreement, a PPP arrangement, public-private partnership arrangement with him at the federal level. Give him an award, give him a recognition at the national level. Give the children to the next 4 or 5 generations things that they will know, they will value, they will forever write their names in gold, and they will have positions, juicy positions that will make them look away from the myopic perspective of having a one-man business. And if we key into that as a nation, take off 60% of the factory, buy into it, let him set up factories in different parts of the country, the 6 geopolitical areas, like Kogi, where you have the iron ore, the mineral resources that it needs to produce these things. We can set up organizations, we can set up businesses around that to produce even some of the parts of the vehicles we use now. We can speak through him with them.
Ajaokuta is 95% complete.
Yes.
I was shocked. When I was on a show with Dr. Biodun Adedikpe on Channels one day, and he said, listen, of course he had worked with the World Bank and so on. He said, look, Ajaokuta is 95% has always been 95% complete. that when he worked with Obasanjo as an SA, he also tried to push, say, listen, let's push this thing through. The problem is that Ajaokuta was built by the Russians. The West will never give you a dime to invest in a Russian project, forget it.
Yes.
And they will not also allow the Russians to come back. I remember the last time the Russians tried to come back, really, was under Umar Yar'Adua, when President Medvedev then came to Nigeria. And so I started to wonder, one of the problems we have, doing things ourselves, why can we not push this Ajaokuta, the remaining 5% ourselves?
Sure, why not?
Yes.
Why
can we have engineers in this country, we have them abroad, whatever the case may be, so that that place is functional. But for the past 40 years or so, that place has been moribund. And I understand we're still paying salaries for
We are paying salaries. Even we have expatriates around there that are taking advantage of that Ajaokuta steel. And of course, I'll give an example.
What will it take?
Now, we need to have this belief that we can do it. We need to have hope. That's the first thing. And then, of course, like we do, you know the rule in auditing and finance, there's a procedure we use in accounting, says the cutoff procedure, where we need to stop the blame game.
Exactly.
And then we start believing in the future of this country, because there's definitely a future. And then because all of us, we need to tell ourselves the truth. We are trying to grab what we can get. And average civil servants in Nigeria today is trying to get as much as they can get from the system to secure their future and the future of their children. So we need, yes. So we need to wake up. We need to come back home, look well into the future. Because until we start thinking and looking inwards, we cannot solve the problem. So everybody we need to tell ourselves the truth. And what is it? Draw the lines. We have been blaming each other about corruption. There's no country in the world that have a perfect system. If you know one, tell me.
Very, very, very.
So there are corruption everywhere. We need to do one thing. It's a risk to us. We know we need to manage our risk. There are 4 ways to manage it. We transfer, we avoid, we mitigate. Where you cannot avoid it, try to reduce it.
Yeah.
And then where you cannot reduce it, you have to accept it. Those are the 4 ways. There is no other way to manage risk. Either you transfer it, find a place to put it, either through insurance or any other way, or you avoid it completely. You reduce or mitigate it. The 4th one is to do what? You accept. Because life, you cannot live life without risk. That you went to bed last night does not give you a guarantee that you're going to come up. And as a country, we must understand that there are some risks that we need to live with. We need to draw the lines. It happened in the UAE. I don't have the figures here, but remember that people were pardoned who had committed some financial crimes in the past, and they were encouraged to come back and put that money in the sector. And you can see what they have done in the country, and you see what they have done. Everybody now today, even they are closing the doors because they have gotten to that level, like China, where they need to look inward. I remember that the vice president and the crown, the ruler, the king of Dubai, once was asked, with the level you are going now, with the rate at which you are developing your sector now, where will you be 20, 30 years from now? By 2050, where will you be? What are your children going to be building? What level of technology are you going to achieve?
And what did he say?
He laughed. He said, we are not going to develop technology at that time any longer. He said, our children are going to go back to riding camels. He said, they are going to go back to riding horses, riding camels, cultural development. They are going to go back to the beginning, which is what I call every one of us. We need to look inwards. We have deposits of mineral resources.
I would like to take just maybe 60 seconds of your closing remarks. And something, I want you to leave Nigerians with something very important as we focus today on the positive aspect of our country and our economy, which is not something that happens very commonly. So, 60 seconds.
All right. I will say that we need to have hope. Faith and hope are the things that can help us get through these dark times. So hope is being able to see that there's light. Despite all the darkness, expect the best from life, and we need to take actions. Underline the word action. We can't fold our hands. We can't continue the way we are doing without taking responsibility for the future, for the change that we wish to see. Therefore, we must see Nigeria where we want it to be. We need to start taking action.
Thank you so much for Mr. Stephen. Thank you very much for coming and for those words. And I must say that this is only the first part. You still have to come, and there's so much to explain. I see you've written so many things down. So we have to invite you another time to
Why
come
not?
and elucidate more, because I like this angle. I'm tired of the gloom and doom and gloom
Sure.
and all the bad news and bad stories.
The prospects are
running
limitless.
down the country,
Yes.
and including the fact that we sometimes accept to be a bad name. People will come here and say, "You guys are the most corrupt country." Say, "Yeah." But we've seen other, even big countries, developed countries, get involved in corruption in a very systemic fashion, toppling governments. You know, I remember when they removed Muammar Gaddafi, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs in the UK, Philip Hammond, said to British businessmen, said, "Now we have removed Muammar Gaddafi, pack your suitcases and head to Libya." Say, look, they don't care. It's all about the money and the business, you know. So it's a good time out. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks very much, viewers, for listening and for staying with us. Join us next week.